Well, hi everyone. I wanted to share a little theory with you or some ideas about young INFJ developments that, are going to be probably a little bit controversial, but that's okay. We're here to discuss new, potentially controversial, but innovative ideas that can spark discussion. So this is linked to some thinking I've been doing on INFJs, but also probably informed by the course that I'm doing in psychotherapy at the moment, Of course, this is stimulating new ideas. This is partly why I decided to follow that course, among other sources of motivation. Now, it's often said, that INFJs have difficult childhoods, and having made a number of videos on the topic, including some pretty recent videos, I'm not going to come forward and contradict this. I think this is true, and this is certainly partly due to the fact that INFJs tend to be misunderstood by their friends at school or by other kids at school. They can be misunderstood by their teachers, and of course that can contribute to a certain kind of personality formation informed by conflict, being misunderstood, being alienated and detached, which they can carry with them into the teenage years and adulthood, and feel those as weights, including in a certain kind of conflict avoidance, a sense of being solipsistic, and so on and so forth. So these trajectories also interact with the classification of subtypes that I propose in my recent work, regarding the adaptive submissive INFJ, the solipsist INFJ, and the more liberated spiritualized INFJ. One thing that is perhaps not emphasized enough, though, and this is where my hypothesis or my proposed way of framing the issue comes into the picture, is that, well, the first moment of incomprehension that INFJs experience, of feeling misunderstood, of feeling disconnected, of feeling alienated, does not actually happen with other kids in school. Of course, that particular period is very formative. We know that the years of youth, the years of childhood are the most formative on our personality and our particular specific personality traits. But the most significant moments, the first and most influential, are of course those with your parents. It is the relationship with our parents that really determine what we're going to be like for most of our lives, or at least what we're going to be dealing with, struggling with, coping with, negotiating. And, well, parents are no different from other people, except that you actually don't even get to choose them, so you've no choice but to interact with them, deal with them, depend on them, and of course give a tremendous sense of importance to what their opinions are, their positions are, their sense of authority, because again, for pretty much the entire duration of your young and normal childhood, you are dependent on them. And like I said, parents are like everyone else, not likely to be INFJ like yourself, or like an INFJ, more likely to be sensors, if not sensors, more likely to be non-INFJ intuitive types, and so likely to also misunderstand you. And if you have a particular very special relationship with your mother, maybe as a child you loved your mother, idealized your mother or your father, knowing that they didn't quite understand you, knowing that they didn't quite value that side of you that you were aware you possessed, might lead to any number of coping or defense mechanisms that you will develop then, and that might follow you later in life. So for example, I'll just come clean and say, for me, that's an experience I certainly experienced, particularly in relationship to my mother, who is an ISFP type. And I did often, I loved my mother. I always, felt a lot of admiration and boundless affection for my mother. But I also felt misunderstood by her. And ever since I was a young child, my defense mechanism has been fantasy production, the production of fantasies to deal with those situations. And I have certainly carried that into my adult life, and this has been the source of difficulties. And I think that a lot of INFJs are going to experience similar things. They might not resort to fantasy production, even though I think this will be one of their go-to defense mechanisms, because NI dominance is so closely connected to fantasy production, because fantasies are linked to the archetypes, they're linked to that entire network of subjectivity. But there's a lot of different kinds of defense mechanisms, projection, introjection, denial, dissociation. Hopefully you don't have that, but and many other ones. But what I mean to say is, when INFJs struggle with being solipsistic or with being adaptive submissive, say, like the first two modes of INFJ life that are kind of prior to the highest mode, which would be liberation as a spiritualized INFJ, one useful theme to think about is your relationship to your parents and how they molded you. I have come to seriously believe that the path to liberation is also going to be dependent to some extent on coming to terms with that relationship, being able to understand it, being able to accept it, being able to forgive, or at least to be completely accepting of what that relationship is and how that relationship unfolded in childhood. Because to some extent you could argue that the conflict avoidance of the adaptive submissive INFJ is likely connected at some stage with a desire to act in conformity with the expectations of a parent or both parents, even though they might actually be contrary to your inmost subjectivity and your deepest aspirations. But you just feel that need that you certainly carry at an unconscious level into adulthood, that need to do what your mommy and your daddy want you to do. You know, again, these are definitely things I have been dealing with myself. The solipsist, in a sense, might be just doing the opposite, might be rejecting everything that the parents represent, might be rejecting everything that society, through particularly the image of the father in Freudian terms and Lacanian terms, represents. Because I like to say that the adaptive submissive and the solipsist are two sides of the same coin. In a sense, they are both carrying with them, and I include myself in this, let me be clear, primitive childhood related defense mechanisms and ways of social interactions that they have not quite slowed off. And I think that the relationship with the parents, the relationship with the idea of forgiveness, of acceptance, are going to be absolutely crucial if you are ever to attain liberation. Liberated INFJs are INFJs that don't really, I mean, there are INFJs who of course have difficult pasts, to some extent everybody does, but there are INFJs who have come to terms with those. And you'll see in my book, in my latest book, that a lot of the narrative around liberation is that you are the owner of your future. And to be the owner of your future, you need to be the owner of yourself. Okay? So let me know in the comments what you think on these musings, and if you think that my particular theory or hypothesis, whatever you want to call it, is stimulating, thought-provoking, or even potentially convincing. Don't forget that I've been talking about my new book. This is the new book, The Infinite Soul, INFJ Life in the Modern World, which looks at the relationship between INFJs and the modern world that is often seen as hostile by INFJs, difficult to live within, again, misunderstands them, they're not fit for it. How to find meaning, value, and purpose in this world. If you're an INFJ, it's a guide, and lots of people that have already got it and are loving it. If you love the book but you haven't reviewed it yet, please drop a review on Amazon, really helps. The link is right below. Its prequel, which looks like, in terms of cover, and its on purpose, is of course the Ecstatic Soul, which looks at the depths of INFJ consciousness and its existential manifestations. The Infinite Soul and the Ecstatic Soul are two books that go together, so you can get the two and do yourself a favor. Okay, so the links are below. And don't forget, the lifeblood of my channel is my Patreon page, so if you would be kind enough to consider supporting me via Patreon, $3.50 a month, you can access bonus content, make suggestions for me to cover, new video topics or even old topics worth revisiting. Please consider joining. Like I said, it really helps me keep going with the channel. I could not do it without you. In the meantime, take care, guys, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.